welcome everybody. I think we're about ready to get started. So welcome to this panel discussion on tapping into the Guidewire ecosystem on your path to success. So our goal really here is to kind of help you make sure that you leave understanding what the heck we mean by the global Guidewire ecosystem and how it can be of huge value to you in your Guidewire journey. All right, so that's our goal, and also to make you feel like you spent a good time at Vegas, right, work-wise. So what we're going to do is, I need to do the safe harbor slide, I apologize. So this is, as you heard in other sessions, we are probably talk about features and functionality that's covered under our safe harbor. Now we've done that one. And also just a reminder that this is a panel discussion. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to talk through some slides, just a few slides to provide some context. I'll ask the panel some questions myself, but then my hope is that it'll inspire you guys to ask your own questions of whatever we're discussing here. So you can either put them in the app as we're talking, or you can be brave and come and stand up at the front, right? And again, as everybody else has said, when you come and stand up at the front, you get to take your mask off, so that's awesome, right? So we'll go with that. Without further ado, what I want to do is kick us off by just doing a brief introduction of myself first, and then I'll give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves because they didn't trust me for whatever I might say about them. So starting with myself, my name's Ant Swindells, as you can read, and I've been at Guidewire for about 11 years. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and most of my time at Guidewire has been spent as part of the delivery services organization in a series of hands-on roles, actually doing actual coding, to more strategic leadership roles. Most recently, my organization that I was running moved across to be part of product development and operations organization, so I now report into Diego. And you know, I got expanded responsibility, so I kind of own driving adoption of the new capabilities that come out for cloud, and also I own the updates in production when you move from one ski resort to another, and also the delivery strategy, which a lot of the enablement content that comes out of that, published as SurePath, is in support of the ecosystem we're going to talk about today. So that's enough about me. I'll hand over to Dan.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Wang. I've been with Guidewire since 2005. I've been in delivery services the entire time, focusing on implementations, and my current function is looking after our cloud program delivery team, which effectively includes cloud assurance, production services, as well as our BA and PMO practices. Ted?
Hi, I'm Ted Krzyzewski. I've been with Guidewire since 2003 and live in South Florida. Spent most of my time actually in the early days working with ClaimCenter and leading ClaimCenter implementations. And over the years have moved into various roles within delivery services. And today I'm a practice director for delivery services alongside my colleague Mark Clark. We share that responsibility to lead delivery services, help with methodology adoption as well across North and South America. I also have the UN practice that reports to me as well.
Awesome. Last but not least.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Mark Clark. Like Ted said, I'm a practice director, so I'll skip the part about what I do. I've been with Guidewire for 15 years, both hands-on and leadership roles. And like Ted said, we are responsible not just for providing input to methodology with SurePath and how we implement projects, but we also are responsible for enabling our team, the delivery services team, as well as our customers and partners. So look forward to answering some questions.
I bet you are.
Yeah.
So what you basically take from those,
what they are.
You take from those introductions that we know enough to be dangerous, okay? That's all you need to remember from them introductions. So let's talk about the primary topic here, which is around leveraging the Guidewire global ecosystem. And it's kind of hard to talk about it unless we define what it is, okay? So this slide is an attempt to do that. And I'll just talk briefly about the various layers in the ecosystem and what they are. but then I'll let the expert panelists kind of elaborate further through a series of questions. So right at the very center is the core team. So this is the core dedicated team, the full-time implementation team, and that's usually comprised of a mixture of the customer, Guidewire, and the partner resources. And they're dedicated on the project, and they're the ones doing all the day-to-day work. But the challenge today is that with the plethora of technologies that are available and what you need to use in order to implement and do a modern-day transformation, no one person really can be expected to know everything, right? I usually refer to the people that know a lot as unicorns, and you know, I kind of believe in unicorns a little bit, at least my daughter does, but there's really not a lot of them around, okay? So because we don't have these unicorns as part of the dedicated core team, we rely on being able to tap into the ecosystem. So if we go to the second layer, what we then say is, well, we've got people that we can tap into on a part-time basis when we need those specialized skills. So by doing that, we kind of maximize the value and minimize the costs. So the type of specialized skills that you might want to tap into are experts that focus on doing nothing else other than data migration. They're absolute experts on how to do data migration. So you might not need them on the project full time. You just want to tap into them when you need them. Same for upgrades and other areas. Then we've got advisory and assurance services, which includes things like implementation management or delivery assessments, where we come and make sure that the projects are on track, and if something's going off the beaten track, then we provide recommendations for course corrections to bring the project back to green. And also, as we're focusing on value, making sure we come in and do assessments to make sure you're realizing the value from the project. These are, again, part-time resources. And finally, methodology and standards specialists. So you'd say, well, yeah, the core team would be expected to know some of those things, but if we can tap into people who are experts in how to define the methodology, maybe they can help you to adapt the methodology and approach to meet your specific requirements. So you wouldn't need them full-time. You want to be able to tap into them. And now, with the third layer is when we really start getting into the power of the ecosystem. So you've got this core team at the center, but they're the conduit to the rest of the ecosystem. So we've got what we say there is the extended services team. So that's all of our services team globally, right? So we've got hundreds and hundreds of people in Guidewire delivery services globally, and they've run into a lot of situations, solved a lot of problems. So if your core team can't get an answer to you, very often they can get an answer real time from the extended ecosystem. So you don't just have the people you've got on the project, you have access to all of these people to provide that specialist knowledge and solve those challenging and difficult problems. We wrap that with global enablement for things like incident handling, managing situations where perhaps we run into some challenges and we get whoever needs to be involved, whether it be from product development, operations, other parts of delivery services, and we manage that project back to green. So that's what global enablement is. And then the final layer is the customer and partner, where they're providing skills and experience for areas that Guidewire don't typically cover, like organizational change management or enterprise program management, because usually a Guidewire project is part of a much larger enterprise program. So that kind of explains all the different layers and what they are. I'm going to now ask the panel a series of questions related to this to kind of preempt some of the things you may be thinking. So I'm going to start off with Ted. It looks pretty smart. So Ted, the global ecosystem certainly looks like it gives us the confidence, right, that we've got the skills available to be able to help. But if I've got this dedicated core team, why then would I need to pay for additional specialists, especially for areas like, I mentioned data migration or value alignment? Why doesn't the core team just know those things?
Yeah, okay, good question. Really, our core team is going to be deeply experienced and knowledgeable, certified, usually in a single product, or many times a single product like Policy Center, Claim Center, Billing Center, our general core products. And about 90% of our team actually have multiple certifications across multiple products. And they have deep experience and can help there, certainly. But then there's areas outside of our core products, as you mentioned before, like data migration is a good example, performance testing in other areas. And there's just not one person who knows everything, right? So the core team, you can rely on them to answer questions around our core products, but when we need that special assistance, we bring in folks in a kind of a part-time basis as needed. And those specialists have very deep knowledge and experience in those certain areas like data migration. So we bring them in when we need them so that we get the kind of the value of their knowledge and experience when we need it, right? To kind of minimize the cost of the project, but maximize the value of those specialists on the program. And, it's nice to also be able to tap into, folks who live and own the methodology collateral day in and day out, to assist the team, assist the customer, and adopt those things to be customer specific. We don't always just use the methodology we follow with every single project. We adopt it to the needs of the program, and it's good to have those specialists available.
That's a great answer. You're like a well-oiled machine this afternoon, Ted. That was amazing. All right, so I'm going to move over to Mark and see if he can match that excellent answer. So Mark, I see that partners are listed as part of the core team, but they're also in the outer ring as well. So can you just elaborate a little bit on the difference in the role the partners are playing in those two different layers?
Sure, this is your softball question for me, isn't it?
This was the easy one.
Yeah. So obviously it's critical that we have customers and partners engaged in that core team. But when we look at Guidewire implementations, let's face it, Guidewire is always part of a larger program. And in order to succeed, we need that expertise and experience in not just managing Guidewire, but managing the entire program. So you talked about program management office, organizational change management, even if we look at performance testing. These are things that partners and customers have experience in doing, and especially our partners who have done this quite a bit. We can certainly provide expertise on Guidewire and those pieces of the system that are related to Guidewire, and we do, but that wouldn't be enough to be successful. We need the entire view of the program, and that's what that outer ring represents.
That's awesome. So basically saying that the outer layer, they're really helping us to scale.
Yeah.
Right? So awesome. All right, Dan, you ready?
Go for it.
Okay. So it's great that we can tap into the additional ecosystem for all of these specialist skills that Mark and Ted have been talking about. But if I've got this dedicated team and they've got this complex project with specific use cases, how can that team be productive quickly, right? If they're just coming in on a part-time basis, how does that work?
That's a fair question. So first, the majority of the needs of the project should be addressable by the core team and the specialized services or the advisory services team, right? Now the thing about that group of folks is they are dedicated but part-time team members that are brought in at the right times on a project, so they already had the context to your program and your requirements from the onset. And now in those rare cases where there are specific or unique situations where you don't know how to address something, then they can tap into the extended services team usually by just summarizing the need, right? And because they're probably pretty focused on a specific requirement, regional or otherwise, usually a summary is enough to get that team ramped up, and then you'll get input from other people, right? And then the global enablement team is tapped into, they work directly with product management, so if you had a product question, you can funnel in through a case ticket with just a general description, and they can get you going on that, right? So the work to get them ramped up is pretty lightweight, and usually just a summary of the need is sufficient.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Great. So just last one on this slide, then at least that I'm going to ask, is Ted, we call it there, it says the Guidewire global ecosystem. So does that mean that all the skills are available from Guidewire?
Well, mostly, yeah. We have deep experience in areas to assist implementing our products, but our partners really enable us to scale, right? And we rely on them. And so, it's really important to make sure that we're including that experience, allow us to scale. We're first and foremost a software company, right? And so, we want to make sure that we have the right assets and skills to augment the team.
Sounds good. All right, so we're going to move forward and just briefly introduce some of the key ingredients of a successful project. So, obviously we're talking a bit about Guidewire delivery services here. We'll elaborate a bit more on that. And we bring that unique product expertise as the product company. We obviously need the Guidewire solutions to actually implement, and with those solutions, we need a lot of the standards of how to implement them and all the enablement collateral that comes with that. But we also need the customers and partners to add the areas that the guys have been talking about, either to allow us to scale, as Ted just talked about, or for areas like enterprise PMO, change management, et cetera. So with that brief context around successful projects, I'll go back to Mark. So Mark, the slide suggests that all cases kind of require me to use Guidewire delivery services and partners, if I was going to read that slide literally. So do I always have to use Guidewire delivery services? Am I mandated to use them?
No, you're not mandated. And in fact, we have several projects right now that are active that have no full-time or even possibly not even active Guidewire participation. So when we think about our partners and what they bring, if you look across the partner community that we have, it's over 8,000 of those partners are certified. And if we look at just the training and the products that we have, over 14,000 are trained. So that, like Ted said, that gives us that opportunity to scale to support the large number of projects that we have active across the globe at any point in time. So it is a critical piece, but like you said, Ann, what we bring in that's unique is that product knowledge and product skill, because we are part of the product. We're part of the software company. So we look at things like the cadence of releases, the accelerated release schedule that we have, the significant features that come out with each one of those releases, plus the specializations, the specialized consulting that you talked about on the eco slide. I mean, those are the things that we can bring that are unique to Guidewire. And of course, customers can engage us either full-time or part-time to bring those skills in whenever it's needed.
I like how you used me to make sure that I agreed with your answer. That was pretty impressive.
I've worked with you for quite a while.
So Ted, I'm just going to flip that question around just a little bit, because Mark talked about whether it's really kind of optional to use Guidewire delivery services, and maybe I'll ask the question the other way around and say, if Guidewire is leading the project, do we always have to use a partner?
No, we don't have to. In fact, we kind of like Mark's answer, we have projects today where we have limited kind of SI resources, or maybe even programs where we have no SI resources at all involved. So, the thing is, if you were to create a team and staff Guidewire to fill all of those roles, we can actually be kind of expensive, right?
Really?
So it's really better. It's recommended for the customer. It follows our methodology. We'd like to see a team that has a small number of core Guidewire resources, and then customer resources, because they bring the expertise from their technology and their business, as well as our SI partners. And it's really important. We think that's important to have that mix and that of resources and knowledge to be successful.
Okay. So it's not one size fits all. It basically depends on the.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll tailor it to what the customer needs, right?
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
The customer makes those decisions. We work with the customer to make sure they're going to be successful. If they feel that that's the best approach to be successful, we'll work with them to do that.
That sounds right. Sounds good. So Dan, with the increased frequency of product releases, right? We're saying we got 2 releases a year that are coming out. There's a lot of new functionality. You're on the stage and you're just looking at all the things that are coming with Dobson. It's just huge, right? So how do we keep our partners and delivery services team members up to date with all that new information that's coming out, so that they're equipped to provide the latest guidance? Because I think that's the key value they bring. But how do we do that?
Well, I mean, the good news is the update courses that come out with each of the releases, it's usually no more than 1 day of content. So the training is actually fairly lightweight in terms of time commitments. And then we supplement that with enablement collateral that we produce through SurePath. And that content is effectively an investment from Guidewire to make sure the latest features are integrated and built into our planning tools. So we know when we plan a project on Dobson, we count for these features on the project, as well as collateral how to implement some of the newer features, like how to use the GT test frameworks, how to use Guidewire Cloud Console, things of that nature, right? So effectively we've made it a point to get the training content out to be lightweight within GA, and then enablement content to supplement that. And then our internal goal is to have all of our consultants certified within 30 days of GA. So, you know, and it takes time. It takes time and planning, but certainly it's fairly lightweight to do that and to acquire that knowledge.
Even for people like Mark?
Oh, he probably needs 2 days.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, actually, yeah, we'll stay with Mark, right? So on a related note, and like going back to that ecosystem, Mark, if partners are as up to date and certified as what Dan just described, right? Because we're doing all this great work to keep everybody up to date, then what is it that really stands the Guidewire consultants, consultants from Guidewire apart? What differentiates?
Yeah, it's good. That's related a bit to what I talked about at the last question too. Let me drill into it a little bit more then. It's very important. It's critically important that everyone, partners, customers, be trained and certified on the project. So absolutely. And then of course, partners like Guidewire bring that experience from multiple projects. So you get that experience to help. And those are important. But I'll go back to the product company, and that's what makes our services team unique. If we look at that release cadence, 2 releases a year, every 6 months, the services team is engaged by the product team. For every release, it's one of the things we do is we provide testing and we provide feedback on the product. But that also helps us because now we've had early access to features, which allows us to develop our thoughts on how best to implement them, what are the best practices, how do you go about implementing them. And it's not just for a release. I mean, whatever release you start on in the cloud, you likely are not going live on that release. So you need to be aware of not just current features and capabilities, but also what's coming down the road. So that's one of the ways in which we harvest that information and provide it to our partners and our customers on projects so that when you're rolling out that next release, you're aware of what's there, you're ready to implement those, and you're ready to use our best practices in doing so. So it actually accelerates adoption, accelerates project, and leads to success.
So you're helping me do my job. I like that, actually. Since I own driving cloud adoption, I love that answer. That's awesome, right? So let's move forward then and just go a little bit deeper on Guidewire delivery services. I think we're pretty obvious from a partner and customer perspective, but let's just hone in a little bit on what Mark's been saying there, right? So, and as Mark said, really, the key differentiator for Guidewire delivery services is we're part of the product company. We're integrated into the product company. So that gives us that unique visibility and insight and influence into the product roadmap. We've now got, part of my team, key delivery services, people from delivery services as part of product development. So you can see how Guidewire's shifting in the way that we're thinking. We've also, along with the unmatched product expertise as the product company, we blend that with deep domain expertise for property and casualty. And then when you plug in that global ecosystem that we talked about, where we've got these consultants available worldwide on tap to answer our questions, you've really got a very powerful ecosystem that can really help you. So we've also got the proven SurePath delivery approach. So Guidewire Delivery Services, even though it's owned by me and I'm now in product development, it's mostly built by delivery services, and we keep re-injecting all that field experience back into it because it's a living body of work. So this proven SurePath approach, we make sure that you understand on the projects what's available and align that to what's coming, right? And then finally, we're helping you to optimize your path to success. And I won't explain that one yet because I'm going to trick somebody over here to kind of get an answer to what that actually means. All right. So, but let's go to the panel now and let them add their insights into the aspects I've just talked about here. And I'll start with Dan. So we talk about, Dan, we refer to SurePath as a proven approach, right? That's what we say. Do we have stats to back up that it's proven?
Yeah, I mean, we actually do track all of our projects that we do globally, and we track to see how we do on them, and the metrics have been very successful. Now, what I found interesting is not so much the metrics, because I mean, you can deliver a project and you can say they're finished, right? But rather look into the things that SurePath and our delivery services team actually, the aspects that it contributes that helps to make these projects successful. And the 3 things I would probably look at is the first part is. The important thing about when you start off a project, you want to make sure you are planning and scoping your project correctly. And so when we talk about new features coming in every release, you want to make sure that's incorporated in your plans, right? In our planning tools, we'll have all these features kind of built in, so when we come in this estimated implementation, we know that you have to use these 3 features and these 5 stories, and then we just kind of make sure plan is right? So that comes with experience from a consultant as well as the tools that we have as part of SurePath. The second item is making sure you have the right knowledge in your team, right? So we talked about the core team and the advisory services, so they bring unique skill sets, and that helps to make sure that we have the right skills on a project, and then they also mentor your teams that go through training, right? And the third pillar, I think, is just making sure we manage our dependencies, right? And a big part of what we do in SurePath is we want to make sure that we plan these projects from start to finish. So we have a very robust conceptual sprint planning tool, which effectively lays out, from sprints 1 through N, which stories and themes are we going to tackle. So then we can then align that to your dependent work streams, right? Like third-party integrations or downstream systems. So we have the dependencies aligned, and we have a cohesive project, right? So in my opinion, those are kind of 3 main pillars that actually help us achieve the metrics that we have for SurePath projects.
Okay, that sounds good. So Ted, I hear claims, we talk a lot about SurePath. Dan's has been talking about it. He talks about the estimates. And one of the things we claim a lot is it enables projects to be implemented a lot faster, right? But it's kind of a little bit subjective. So what exactly is faster, and what are we doing more specifically to enable projects to go faster?
Sure. Well, it's really the whole point of devoting so much time into the SurePath methodology and collateral. We really don't want customers and project teams to be spending a lot of time on project preparation, on building a methodology, on documentation for the program, in lots of other areas. We really want to make sure that we have tools available to provide the team, provide the customer abilities and basically quick starts, right? So they don't have to build the approach. They don't have to build the templates. They're already there. I mean, our SurePath collateral, it has so much stuff, we've got white papers, we have process flows, we obviously have the entire methodology that can be adopted and changed if you need to. We've got pre-built configured solutions, that can be applied to the program. So you're not spending time on designing and building out those things. You can just leverage them and get a really good starting point. Similarly, for integration points, we have vendor agnostic and vendor specific integration points that are already built along with testing. So, why spend all that time in a program building and designing that stuff when it's already available? So the whole point in having that collateral and investing so much money that Guidewire does in that program is to ensure that projects go faster. And that collateral will help us do that. We've heard, we've been around at Guidewire for a few years between the 3 of us, and we've heard in the past that Guidewire projects take too long, right? And so we have been focusing on this to specifically make projects go faster.
Okay. But I don't know about you, but I don't think you didn't answer the second part of my question there about how fast can we go, Ted?
Very fast.
Like on the main stage, we talked about the other day about microbot, right, and those kind of solutions, right? Yeah. So what are the typical durations that we've been seeing, right, as people have been doing more greenfields type implementations and stuff? I mean, is it still take like 6 months, 12 months, or can we get it under 3 months?
No, yeah. So, programs that, when I look at, say, a Claim Center implementation or even an Insurance Suite implementation that previously may have taken 12 months, 14 months or more, we're able to get those down to 6 months and less, and we're aiming to get it into a 3-month window, right? Yeah. So the more collateral that we build, the more it's helping us to accelerate, and that will continue to improve.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I need that because I've made commitments to lower implementation estimates by 50% by the end of next year, right? So that's a good answer. All right, and through these investments. So Mark, we kind of covered the unique product roadmap, the unmatched product expertise, and the SurePath delivery. These are kind of making sense, but I said I was going to get a bit more challenging for you. So do you want to just unpack a little bit about what the heck we mean by optimize your path to success?
It's not crystal clear. Yeah, when I think about that aspect of the services team, I look at our experience, our global experience across insurers of all sizes. We like to say 15 million to 50 million, or rather 15 million to 50 billion, rather, I'm sorry. So it's a large scale of experience and different requirements on each one of those. So from a Guidewire services perspective, It's enabled by our product expertise, by our SurePath approach, as well as our average 8 years experience for our field consultants that can bring that expertise to provide that strategic perspective on how to implement our solutions. We talk a little about SurePath. So we formalized SurePath about 3 years ago, I think it was. And I say that formalized like we didn't publish per se, because we always had it. We just recognized that all of the things we'd pulled together and our proven success on projects, that we needed to become a little more serious about it. So we gave it a trademark name. But since doing that, we can quote that 100% of the projects that we have that utilize SurePath have gone live successfully. So it is a proven approach, and it is something that we employ on our projects. And it's not just Guidewire. We make it available to every customer and also to all our partners. So, if I just wrap that up into something maybe a little bit more easy, more words, but a little bit less easier than optimize your path to success, I view it as, just fully taking advantage, utilizing the SurePath approach, as well as that Guidewire extended ecosystem that we've been talking about, to really drive value on the projects and to guarantee, or at least to accelerate your delivery and go live successfully.
Sounds good. So we keep talking about, SurePath and how it's a key ingredient and how it's making you successful. But Dan, maybe if I could ask you from a partner perspective, if the customers and partners have got their own kind of methodology and approach, is SurePath still relevant to them?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. SurePath is really a combination of methodology, tools, and content. You can use whatever methodology you want, and you can still use the tools. So the planning tools to make sure you have the right scope and the most current estimates is still valid, as well as all the collateral that gives you standardized solutions, right? Those are all going to save you time on projects and stuff that we will highly recommend every customer use, regardless of how you choose to implement and whatever methodology that you use.
Sounds good. All right, so let's move to this slide that talks a little bit more about, it's really changing the way that you do it. If we're going to go faster and we're going to, be able to keep up with the fast releases and stuff, then we need to shift the way we think and the way we do delivery projects today. So this slide kind of alludes to some of that and how Guidewire Delivery Services and your partners are helping you to think differently. So just high-level context first. We're really focusing on, solutions versus the product. So figuring out what is your end-to-end solution, and then helping you to match what product capabilities you need in order to do that, versus taking a product-centric approach, right? So we're trying to leverage the right capabilities to solve your specific cases. We're also moving away from writing reams of code, right? A lot more, we're trying to drive towards business-driven configuration. It's much less risky. We can use different skill sets in order to implement it. And it really maximizes the use of the base product and the pre-built solutions. And then instead of coming to you, which to be fair, we did used to do this, right? We'd come in and say, hey, there's 10 different ways you can do this, and here's the different ways you can do it. Which one do you want, right? We can't do that anymore, right? Because things are moving too quickly. So what we now do, and really what was requested from our customers, is to say, they want us to come with a more prescriptive answer. They want to say, tell us what to do, right? You're the product company. You know where the product's going. Tell us what to do. So we're being much more prescriptive and making sure we're providing guidance to you that meet your specific requirements, but they're aligned to where the future product direction is going, so that you're kind of making sure that you're not configuring things in a way that is going to make it difficult for you to adopt new capabilities in the future. So let's just ask the panel a few questions on this slide quickly before we get to opening it up to the floor. So Ted, so we say focus on solutions rather than products. And, if I'm sitting in the audience being a bit of a skeptic about this, I'd say, hey, didn't I buy a pre-built solution for property and casualty insurance? So what the heck are we talking about?
It's a good question. So yeah, it's obviously our products are full of functionality, best practices, workflow, and those types of things. But it's important to make sure that we have these pre-built solutions that we can plug in to our products and enable whether it's a configured solution for a piece of functionality that you want to use in the UI, or whether it's an integration that we want to plug in instead of spending time designing and building and testing that. It's much more appropriate to take what we've built, apply it to the implementation, along with the testing that goes with it, so that we're spending less time.
Well, that's interesting. And we're talking about pre-built solutions, but perhaps Mark can complete you by talking a little bit about, well, if everybody's using these pre-built solutions that are all kind of common, then how am I differentiating myself, Mark?
Stop right there. So, pre-built solutions, when we think of those, what do they do? Well, let's step back, right? In my perspective, they're enablers. They're true enablers. Yesterday, I sat in on Jack Reichner's session on SurePath content, right? And he stood up 3 pre-built solutions. So he stood up rate capping, tiered authority in Billing Center, and then segmentation and assignment in Claim Center. So I don't know if anyone here was there and saw that as well, but if not, you should play the recording. Because it probably took Jack a day to install those 3 things, which if you build them on your own, that's hundreds of hours to build that out. Just rate capping is so complex. Beyond that, he spent 10 minutes walking through how it lifted all of basically things that we would handle in GoSu and code, and it was all through a UI, a business-driven UI. So he stepped through what the rate capping rules were going to be. He stepped into Billing Center and set up the authority limit routing in a hierarchical manner, which is not supported out of the box. And he also went into Claim Center. Of course, we can do assignment, segmentation, and assignment in Claim Center. But he was doing it through drop-downs and driving it through a UI that a business person could do. We didn't bounce the system. Nothing happened. In 10 minutes, he had that up and running. Literally just, even if you built all that, right, then to be able to do that in GoSu, to differentiate yourself, would take days, not hours, not minutes, right? So what do I get from that, right? I think that's a great illustration that says, yes, these are pre-built solutions. They have all of our standards implemented. They have testing included in them, all the automated testing. They're using all of our best practices. And then they give you that great lift to accelerate implementation of these features. And then you can apply the remaining significant amount of discretionary spend you've saved to figure out how else you might want to differentiate yourself in the market. And certainly you can differentiate yourself through these features. This content that's delivered strictly through UIs, which would take a lot of time to build on your own. So that's where I look at them as enablers.
Remind me not to challenge him ever again, because he's on a roll.
All right, you can start up again.
So, Ted, are these available globally?
Yeah, in fact, they are. I guess, when you look at what we have a lot of content that is kind of US-based, but we have been focusing on making sure that we build out content and collateral which is applicable globally and regionally. In fact, we've built a team specifically to do that and focus on that. So if you look at Marketplace, probably about 85% of what's out there and available in Marketplace is applicable globally. Awesome. and have regional solutions. So that's a good quantity of material.
Just very quickly, Dan, from a GoSu, if I'm not writing loads of GoSu code anymore, am I losing flexibility?
No, I mean, the way our product is going is actually more business-driven configuration capabilities, right? So things like APD, that's a framework where you can use mind maps to illustrate your insurance product. Policy Center ingests that in, and then you have a product, right? And then just some of the things that Mark alluded to, every customer has different rates and parameters that they put in. That's how they differentiate themselves, right? And you can still do that in those frameworks without writing a single line of GoSu. So if done right, yeah, you can absolutely still do all that without GoSu.
Sounds good. So that's enough from me in terms of questions. I've just thrown up this last slide because this kind of calls out some of the points that you would have heard the panelists kind of talk to as we're having the discussion. We're really close on time. Maybe I'm being told that our time's up, so we don't have any time for more questions. But if you do have more questions, a bunch of us kind of been hanging out at the delivery services booth in the partner pavilion. So come and see us there, or just tap us up anywhere you like, and we're willing to talk further and answer any of the questions you may have. But I'll end that with thank you so much for your time today and for listening to us, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.